Question so that we can bring in the whole panel. And that question is from Elaine Jontek.
Last week on QandA, philanthropist Bill Gates made a clear distinction in his criteria for his investments and his charities. He does not support tobacco industries, but he's happy to invest in resources, including fossil fuel energy companies. What does the panel think of this view?
Let's go to Michael Stutchbury, and bear in mind you're sitting next to someone who wants these corporations, or at least foundations like the Gates Foundation, to divest, get rid of their fossil fuel shares.
That I want.
No,
you're sitting
next to Bill.
Yeah, I think this is one of Bill's things that this campaign to get investors to pull out of coal companies and so forth. I think you can readily accept that the global temperature has warmed, that the great majority of scientific opinion suggests that's due to the burning of fossil fuels and the emission of carbon dioxide. I personally always, I think you can accept that. I think you should also, from my point of view, I want to remain a little bit sceptical. I know you're not supposed to say, if you say you're a skeptic, that's a terrible thing in this area. But I think the sort of journalistic position should be just to be a little bit sceptical of, the capacity of the scientific community to project something this complex this far out in the future. And although the temperatures over the past 10 years, as Bill said, has been the highest on human record, the global temperatures have levelled out over the last 15 years. They are tracking now at the lower end of what all the models say. The article in The Economist pointed that out the other day. So I think we've got to remain open to how this thing's progressing. I think the idea that Bill's maintaining of a campaign to divest, for people to sell out of Australian coal companies, basically close down the Australian coal industry, is sort of verging on madness. I think people really in Australia have to realise the extent to which our living standards are propped up by this high coal, iron ore and fossil fuels generally. I think we should be, in effect, proud of what Australia's done to fuel the rise of living standards in East Asia, and that our coal and our exports have largely done this. This has been the greatest eradication of poverty probably in human history.
So the coal barons are doing this not to make money, but to make development more prevalent in China.
Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, Tony. It's got a long pedigree. I haven't
met any Adam Smiths running coal companies in Australia.
And that if we did close down, say if we closed down the Australian coal industry, that would be not only a very big blow to the Australian economy and to the living standards of everyone here. There wouldn't be any Gonski school reforms, there wouldn't be any NDIS, for example, but I don't think it'd have any effect as well, because if we close down our coal exports, exports of coal to China and India and so forth would come from somewhere else. And you could easily even make a case, I think, that the net effect on the environment of CO2 emissions could even be worse, given the dirtiness of the alternative sources.
I think what people are talking about is not. I think what people are talking about. I think people are talking about is not expanding coal mining in Australia. Currently, the plan is to triple coal exports out of this country. Okay, the scientists have told us that in order to avoid a 2-degree increase in temperature, which Australia signed on to as its target, we can only put about 560 or so gigatons, billion tons more carbon into the atmosphere. So at current plans for expansion, these Australian coal mines would fill about 30% of that world's carbon budget. Australia has somewhat less than 30% of the world's population. It's nice that that Mr. Palmer and Ms. Reinhardt and whatever can make huge sums of money doing this, but at a certain point, if we're going to deal with climate change, we have to keep most of the coal and oil and gas that we know about underground. And the good news is we now know what comes next. We look around and see that already in this country, wind power is economically on par. We see the real beginnings of a solar revolution going on here. And we look at countries like, say, Germany, okay, where there were days last summer when the Germans generated more than half the power they used from solar panels within their borders. If you can do that in Germany, and Munich is north of Montreal, think what you might do with a continent that was as blessed by the sun as this one.
Okay, Cory Bernardi, I want you to respond to that first.
when Bill flies here in his wind-powered jet, I'll be delighted to endorse his views. The lady asked the point about Bill Gates. Bill Gates, it's his money, he can invest it as he sees fit. And I think we are blessed with an abundance of resources in this country. They create hundreds of thousands of jobs. They generate billions of dollars worth of wealth that spreads right through the country, provides us with the cheapest electricity available, and yet somehow you want us to turn our back on it. I think to do that would be absolute madness, and it would be a sheer folly for anyone in this country to pursue.
I just want to interrupt. I want to hear from Martha. I know you've actually been involved in campaigns to stop fracking in your state. That's slightly different, but it is a fossil fuel industry.
Yes, you know, my biggest dream is that all the planes that I take, that those wings would have solar panels on them. I wish they did. I wish that you know, you know, I'm from Canada, very much like Australia, and in the sense that we use they use a lot of their natural resources, and I'm embarrassed by it. You know, I'm an idealist. You know, I'm just an artist and a dumb blonde a lot of the time, but you know, I think it has to be turned around, and I dream of a world that has more renewable energies.
Martha,
it's as simple as that.
Don't let yourself be intimidated. These guys are saying, "Oh, it's madness." Both of them. It's madness. What's madness is to take the course that science has told us will transform this planet. Madness is a temperature rise of 2 or 3 or 4 degrees. The only economic analyses we have of this, the biggest one from Lord Stern in the UK, shows that the economic cost would be larger than World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression combined. Madness is what we're doing right now. If you're serious about climate change, you got to leave that stuff underground.
We've got another question on there. Oh, sorry, you want to say?
I think it's interesting that you want to embrace these wonderful things that you have here, you know, and it's embracing them, raping them, you know, and taking advantage of the natural resources. Why not just be happy that they exist rather than use them, you know, in a violent way? You know, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you do have the problem of China and India and them needing power to fuel their development and all that sort of stuff.
But the infrastructure is in such a way that coal and fossil fuel is what we use. There is another way, but it's a big shift to make, and it's the harder shift to make, and people don't want to do the harder thing.
That's right.
But it's simply not sustainable.
Okay, all right. So we've got another questioner down on the floor.
How will
David.
we ever know?